Death doesn't flash your life before your eyes. It just hurts. My last memory was the crunch of metal, the smell of burning gasoline, and Chloe's perfectly manicured hands resting on the edge of my shattered windshield. She didn't call for help. She just watched me bleed, whispering, "I'll take good care of your shares, Harper, and your fiancé." Then the dark hit. Now I'm staring at my bedroom ceiling. No hospital, no blood, just the glowing date on my phone 3 weeks before I died. Welcome to Rebirth Day 1. Time to take out the trash. The human brain is a funny thing. It remembers pain that hasn't happened yet. I woke up gasping my hands, clawing at my own ribcage, expecting the jagged edge of a steering column. Instead, my fingers found the soft, expensive cotton of my own pajamas. The air in the room was cool, smelling faintly of lavender, and the expensive espresso brewing down the hall. I sat up. The nausea hit me in a rolling wave, forcing me to lean over the edge of the mattress. My reflection in the full-length mirror caught my eye. No lacerations, no blood matting my dark hair. I looked pale, exhausted, but entirely whole. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. October 14th, the date punched the air out of my lungs. October 14th, the day of the Zenith merger announcement. The day I signed the preliminary proxy documents because I had a migraine, trusting my brilliant, supportive best friend to hand-deliver them to the board. The documents that I would later learn had an extra page slipped into the stack, slowly bleeding my equity into a shell company, controlled by her and the man sleeping in the guest room down the hall. The bedroom door creaked open. Harper, you, awake, sleepyhead Chloe. My chest seized. A phantom spike of adrenaline flooded my veins, hot and metallic. She walked in, holding a ceramic mug, the steam curling around her blonde, perfectly tousled hair. She wore one of my cashmere sweaters. She was always borrowing my things, my clothes, my company, my life. "I brought you coffee," she said, her voice dripping with that signature cloying sweetness. "You were tossing and turning all night. Derek said he heard you through the wall. You're stressing about the Zenith deal, aren't you? Show don't tell. That was the first rule of survival I learned in the gap between life and death. If I screamed, if I lunged at her throat and squeezed until those bright blue eyes bugged out of her skull, they'd lock me up. I'd be exactly what they wrote me off, as in the first timeline, hysterical, unstable, paranoid. I forced my hands to uncurl from the bedsheets. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the scent of the espresso ground me in reality. "Just a bad dream," I said. My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to a ghost. Chloe sat on the edge of my bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. The proximity made my skin crawl. She reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so intimate, so deeply ingrained in our 10-year friendship, that it actually broke my heart a little. That was the worst part of dying. Realizing the monster wasn't hiding under the bed. She was making it for you. "You push yourself too hard," Chloe murmured, her brow furrowing in a flawless imitation of concern. "You know you don't even have to go in today. Derek and I can handle the prep with the lawyers. You should rest. I can take the proxy forms in for you." There it was, the pivot point. In the old life, I smiled, thanked her, and swallowed 2 painkillers before falling back asleep. I handed her the gun she used to shoot me in the back. In this life, I reached out and took the coffee mug from her hands. It was warm, solid, real. "No," I said, taking a deliberate sip. It was bitter, perfect. "I wouldn't miss today for the world. I'm getting dressed." Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a microscopic twitch at the corner of her mouth. If I hadn't spent my last moments watching her stare blankly into my dying eyes, I would have missed it. "Are you sure?" She pressed her voice, tightening slightly. "Derek was just saying this morning how worried he is about your burnout." "Derek worries too much," I replied, throwing off the covers and standing up. My legs were shaky, but they held. "Tell my loving fiancé I'll be down in 10 minutes. We have a lot of paperwork to review." As I walked into the bathroom and shut the door, I didn't turn on the light immediately. I just leaned my forehead against the cool mahogany wood, closing my eyes. I had less than 8 hours before the board meeting. 8 hours to dismantle a trap that had taken them months to build. The grief was there heavy and suffocating in the back of my throat. But right beside it was something sharper, something cold. I turned on the faucet, splashing freezing water onto my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. She was dead. The woman looking back was just the debt collector. Our office occupied the top floor of a restored warehouse in the meatpacking district. Exposed brick glass walls, million-dollar views. I built this. I wrote the initial code for the logistics software that was about to make us all filthy rich. Derek was the smooth-talking front man who charmed the investors. Chloe was the operations manager who supposedly kept the trains running on time. Walking out of the elevator, the familiar hum of the startup hit me. Phones ringing keyboards, clacking the smell of dry erase markers and ambition. Harper. Derek was waiting by the reception desk. He looked like a spread in a menswear catalog, sharp navy suit, perfectly styled hair, that easy boyish grin that had originally convinced me to say yes when he got down on one knee last Christmas. He moved in to kiss me. I turned my head just enough so his lips caught my cheek. "Morning," I said, not breaking stride, as I headed toward my glass-walled office. Derek blinked, trailing after me, like a confused golden retriever. "Whoa. Someone's all business today. Chloe said you were feeling under the weather." "I recovered," I said, dropping my bag onto my desk and booting up my dual monitors. Chloe hovered in the doorway, clutching a stack of manila folders. Her eyes darted from me to Derek. There was a silent conversation happening there, a rapid exchange of micro-expressions. I could read them like cheap code now. She's not playing along. "What do we do?" "The lawyers need the proxy signatures by noon." "Harper," Chloe said, stepping into the room and placing a folder directly on my keyboard. "Since Zenith is buying an 80% stake, they want absolute assurance on our voting block. If you just sign the final page, Derek and I can take it downtown while you handle the engineering team's panic attack over the server migration." I looked down at the folder. It looked identical to the one from my memory. "Leave it," I said, not looking up from my screen. "I'll review it before lunch." "Harper, it's standard boilerplate." Derek set his voice, taking on that patronizing, soothing tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. He leaned over my desk, invading my space. "We reviewed it with counsel yesterday. You don't need to waste your time reading every subclause. I'm signing away control of the company I built in my garage." "Derek," I said, looking up at him. I held his gaze. I looked deep into those brown eyes I used to trust unconditionally. They looked shallow now, empty. "I'm going to read the subclauses." Derek swallowed hard, his atoms apple bobbing. He forced a chuckle and backed away. "Right, of course. Just don't take too long. We have a timeline." "I'm very aware of the timeline," I said. As soon as they left and closed the glass door, I locked it. I pulled the blinds down, a rare move that I knew would spark whispers in the bullpen, but I didn't care. I opened the folder. The first 20 pages were exactly what they claimed to be standard acquisition proxy agreements. But I didn't stop there. I flipped to page 21. There it was. It was buried beneath a wall of dense legalese, disguised as an addendum to the voting rights. But the core language was unmistakable. It wasn't just giving Derek my proxy vote for the merger. It was a durable power of attorney over my equity holdings triggered by a heavily buried clause regarding medical incapacity. In my first life, I had complained of migraines and exhaustion for months. Chloe had been the one making my doctor's appointments, picking up my prescriptions. She had been laying the paper trail. They just needed my signature on this single page, slipped seamlessly into a stack of boring merger documents, and they could claim I had willingly handed over control due to my failing health. After that arranging an accident, where my brakes failed on a steep hill, was just the final bloody bow on top of their theft. My hands shook, rattling the paper. A wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me. 10 years of friendship, 3 years of an engagement, all of it weighed and measured against a 9-figure payout. I didn't tear the paper. I didn't throw things. Instead, I pulled out my cell phone and dialed a number I had memorized from a frantic, desperate night in my first life, right before my world ended. Arthur Sterling's office. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Arthur. Tell him it's Harper Quinn. Tell him I have a corporate espionage case involving a 9-figure merger, and I need him to draft a silent revocation of proxy and a civil asset freeze by noon. There was a pause, then a click. A deep, gravelly voice came on the line. Miss Quinn, you have my attention. What are we freezing? Everything, I said. For the next 3 hours, I worked in silence. I didn't just deal with the lawyer. I went into the company's internal server. As the lead engineer, I had backdoor access that Chloe and Derek didn't even know existed. They were careless. They thought I was too trusting, too blinded by love and friendship to ever check their digital footprints. I pulled the server logs. I found the private Slack channel they had hidden under a dummy project name. I downloaded the transcripts. Derek, did she take the pills? Chloe, yes, she's dead on her feet. She'll sign anything you put in front of her tomorrow. Derek, I can't wait to be done with this. She's so paranoid lately. Chloe, just keep playing the loving fiancé. 2 more weeks, babe. Then we're free. Reading it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. The pain was already spent. This was just raw data now. Evidence. At 11:45 a.m., I printed the documents Arthur had messaged me. I signed them. I took a photo of the original forged addendum, sent it to Arthur's investigator, and then carefully extracted the page from Chloe's folder, sliding it into my purse. I unlocked the door and raised the blinds. The bullpen was quiet. Derek and Chloe were standing by the coffee machine, talking in hushed tones. When they saw my door open, they sprang apart immediately, adopting masks of casual nonchalance. I walked over to them, holding the manila folder. All done, I said, handing the folder to Chloe. She took it eagerly, her fingers gripping the cardboard, a little too tight. Great. I'll get this right to legal. You do that. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Because I knew something she didn't. The folder she was holding was completely useless, stripped of the fatal page, and superseded by a legal grenade that was currently sitting on Arthur's desk. Lunch to celebrate? Derek asked, wrapping an arm around my waist. His cologne smelled like lies. Actually, I said, stepping smoothly out of his grip. "Let's do dinner, the three of us. We should go to Le Jardin. We have a lot to talk about before the announcement tomorrow." They exchanged a look. Relief. Triumph. They thought they had won. "Dinner it is," Chloe beamed. "I'll make the reservation." Le Jardin was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was designed to make everyone look wealthy, and the menu didn't list prices. It was our favorite spot. We celebrated our Series A funding here. Derek proposed to me at the corner table. Tonight, we were at a booth in the center of the room. The ambient noise of clinking crystal and polite laughter provided the perfect acoustic cover. Chloe was radiant. She wore a slip dress that I had bought her for her birthday. Derek had his hand resting on the back of her chair, a casual gesture, but one that screamed ownership. If I looked closely, I could see the way their legs pressed together under the table. How had I been so blind to the merger? Derek said, raising his glass of champagne. And to the most brilliant founder in the tech world. "Harper, we couldn't have done this without you." "No," I said softly, picking up my water glass instead of the champagne. "You really couldn't have." I took a sip of water and set the glass down deliberately. I didn't touch my food. "Harper, you're not drinking," Chloe noted, tilting her head. "Are you feeling okay? Is the migraine back?" Always laying the groundwork. Always building the narrative of the sick, unstable Harper. "I'm perfectly healthy, Chloe. Better than I've been in months, actually," I said. I reached into my designer bag on the seat next to me. I pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope and placed it squarely in the center of the white tablecloth, right between the caviar and the truffle risotto. Derek frowned at it. "What's this more technical specs? Harper, we're off the clock." "I think you should open it, Derek," I said. My voice was calm, measured. The adrenaline was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, clinical focus. He laughed, nervously, looking at Chloe. She gave a tiny shrug, her smile tightening. Derek reached out, broke the seal, and pulled out the stack of papers. The first page was a blown-up, high-resolution printout of their hidden Slack messages. Derek's eyes scanned the top line. I watched the blood physically drain from his face. His jaw went slack. The handsome, confident facade shattered in real time, leaving behind a pale, terrified little boy. "Harper," he choked out his voice, a dry rasp. "Keep reading," I instructed. Chloe, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, snatched the papers out of his hand. Her eyes darted across the printed text. "Just keep playing the loving fiancé. 2 more weeks, babe." Her breath hitched. The champagne flute in her left hand trembled, spilling a few drops onto the immaculate tablecloth. She looked up at me, her blue eyes wide the mask of the sweet best friend, finally irreversibly slipping off. "Harper, this is a misunderstanding. This is out of context." Chloe stammered her mind, scrambling for an angle. "Someone hacked our server. This is a deep fake. You know how vicious our competitors are. Don't insult my intelligence, Chloe," I said, leaning forward. "I pulled the IP logs. The messages originated from your personal laptop and Derek's phone. But that's just page 1. I pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the stack. Trembling, Derek moved the chat logs aside. Underneath was the original page 21, the forged addendum granting him power of attorney. Attached to it was a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert I had retained at 1 p.m., confirming the initials on the bottom corner were a traced forgery. "I didn't sign it, Derek," I whispered, holding his terrified gaze. I pulled it out of the stack today. You tried to steal my company. You tried to steal my life. Harper, listen to me, Derek pleaded. He reached across the table, trying to grab my hands. I recoiled, as if he were radioactive. It was just a contingency. The board was worried about your health. We were just trying to protect the deal. Protect you. By stealing my equity, by draining my accounts into a Cayman Shell corporation. I interrupted. I tapped the third document in the pile, a summary of the offshore accounts they had quietly set up 3 months ago. Chloe was silent. The gears in her head were grinding, looking for a way out. She was always the smart one of the two. She knew when a game was lost. "What do you want, Harper?" Chloe asked. Her voice had dropped an octave. The sweetness was gone. "Good. I preferred the snake when it hissed." "I already have what I want," I said, leaning back in the plush leather booth. "At 4 p.m. today, Arthur filed a massive civil suit against both of you for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. I also exercised my majority voting rights, which I still possess to terminate both of your employment contracts with Aura Tech, effective immediately, for cause." Derek looked like he was going to vomit. You fired us. You can't do that. The Zenith deal is moving forward," I corrected him. "Just without you. They are buying my company. You two get absolutely nothing. In fact, by the time my lawyers are done with you, you'll be drowning in legal debt for the rest of your natural lives." "You malicious bitch," Chloe hissed, leaning across the table, her face twisted in ugly rage. "You think you can just erase us? We built this with you." "You didn't build anything, Chloe. You stole," I said softly. I stood up from the table. "You stole my ideas. You stole my fiancé. And you tried to steal my future. I'm just taking it back." I picked up my purse. I looked at Derek one last time, the man I had once thought I would die for. He was sitting there, shrinking into the booth, completely paralyzed by the destruction of his own ego. "Have a lovely dinner," I said, looking down at them. "Don't worry about the check. It's the last thing I'll ever pay for you." I turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. The cool night air of the city hit my face, smelling of exhaust and freedom. I was alive, and they were ruined. But as I hailed a cab, looking at the city lights blurring past the window, I knew this was just the beginning. Exposing them to each other was easy. Now I had to ensure the rest of the world saw them for exactly what they were. The real war started tomorrow. I didn't sleep. You would think after carrying the physical memory of a car crash and the psychological weight of a betrayal, a person would collapse. But the human body runs on a strange, archaic battery when it knows it's being hunted. Adrenaline, spite, survival. By 7 a.m., I was in a sterile conference room at Arthur Hayes' law firm. The coffee was terrible, burnt and acidic, but I drank 2 cups anyway. The caffeine hummed in my blood, keeping the edges of my vision sharp. "They're going to try and kill the deal," Arthur said. He was a man in his late 50s, possessing the kind of ruthless gray-haired calm that billed at $1,000 an hour. He slid a fresh stack of bound paper across the mahogany table. "Derek has been calling Zenith's acquisitions director since 6 this morning. Left 4 voicemails. He's claiming you had a mental break at dinner last night and that the board needs to trigger a medical competency review." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. They were running the exact same playbook, even backed into a corner, with the evidence of their fraud sitting on the table. Their first instinct was to gaslight. It was almost insulting how little they respected me. "Let them call," I said, signing the bottom of the non-disclosure agreement Arthur had drafted. Zenith wants my algorithms, not Derek's golf handicap. Have we secured the server lockouts? As of midnight, Chloe and Derek's credentials are dead. Their corporate cards are frozen, and the building security has their photos on the Do Not Enter list. Arthur leaned back, tapping a gold pen against his notepad. You realize this meeting at Zenith today is going to be a bloodbath. Richard Cole does not like surprises. If he smells instability in your C-suite, he'll pull the term sheet. Richard Cole likes money, I corrected. I'm about to save him $80 million in severance and redundancy packages by trimming the fat before he even buys the company. At 9:45 a.m., I walked into the Zenith building. It was a monument to corporate power, 40 stories of tinted glass and brushed steel in the financial district. I wore a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. Armor. I needed armor. The lobby was vast, echoing with the click of expensive shoes on marble. And right by the security turnstiles, looking like two desperate teenagers outside a nightclub, were Derek and Chloe. Derek's suit looked slept in. Chloe had heavy concealer under her eyes, her usual perfect posture sagging into something frantic. They spotted me the second I walked through the revolving doors. Harper, Derek shouted, drawing the stares of two nearby executives. He rushed forward, but Arthur stepped smoothly into his path, a physical barrier of custom wool and legal authority. Mr. Hayes represents me, Derek, I said, not breaking my stride. I stopped just out of arm's reach. If you try to touch me again, he will add a restraining order to the civil suit. You can't do this, Chloe hissed, stepping up beside him. Her voice was a low, trembling vibration of panic. We called the board. We told them what you did. You can't fire us without a majority vote. I am the majority vote, I replied, my voice dead flat. You spent 2 years trying to dilute my shares, Chloe. But you got greedy. You wanted the offshore accounts funded first. You didn't finish the paperwork. Harper, please. Derek's voice cracked. The aggression evaporated, replaced by the pathetic whining tone of a man who realized he was standing on a trapdoor. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll walk away from the cash. Just don't tell Richard. If Zenith finds out my reputation is dead, I'll never work in this sector again. I looked at him. Really looked at him. In my first life, I had chosen the music for our wedding. I had picked out names for our hypothetical children. I had bled out on a dashboard, thinking he was waiting for me at home. That's the point, Derek, I said softly. I turned my back on them and walked through the security gate. I didn't look over my shoulder, but I could hear the Zenith security guards politely but firmly asking them to leave the premises. The boardroom on the 39th floor smelled of lemon polish and ozone. Richard Cole, the CEO of Zenith, sat at the head of the table. He was a sharp, angular man who built his career on aggressive takeovers. He didn't smile when I walked in. He just looked at the empty chairs behind me. Ms. Quinn. Richard, said his voice like dry gravel. I was expecting your COO and your head of operations. I also received some highly irregular voicemails this morning, suggesting Aura Tech is currently undergoing a hostile internal dispute. Arthur moved to speak, but I held up a hand. This was my company, my fight. You received voicemails from 2 former employees, I said, taking my seat directly across from him. I didn't open a laptop. I didn't fumble with notes. I just held his gaze. Derek and Chloe were terminated for cause late last night. The details involve attempted corporate embezzlement and fraud. A police report is being filed as we speak, alongside a civil asset freeze. Silence descended on the room. The 4 Zenith lawyers sitting along the wall stop typing. Richard's eyes narrowed. You fired your entire executive team 12 hours before a 9-figure acquisition. Richard stated, it wasn't a question. It was an accusation of insanity. I excised a cancer before it infected your investment. I replied, leaning forward. Zenith is acquiring Oratech for the predictive logistics engine. I built that engine. I hold the patents. I write the core architecture. Derek was a mouthpiece. Chloe was a glorified secretary who managed the calendar. They attempted to leverage this merger to steal my equity. I caught them. I crushed them. And I am here on time, ready to sign. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single, slim folder. I slid it across the long table. That is a sworn affidavit from a forensic accountant detailing their offshore structures and a signed confession from the handwriting expert they hired to forge my proxy. I said, you have a choice, Richard. You can walk away, and I will take my software to your biggest competitor by Friday. Or you can sign the papers today, acquire a clean company with zero executive bloat, and save yourself the 20% equity payout you were going to hand to 2 thieves. Richard stared at the folder. He didn't open it. He looked back up at me. The silence stretched tight as a piano wire. Then the corner of his mouth twitched, a microscopic smirk. I hate executive bloat, Richard said. He picked up his pen. Let's review the final terms. There is a specific kind of death in the corporate world. It isn't loud. It isn't violent. It's a slow, quiet asphyxiation. People just stop returning your calls. Your emails bounce back. Your name becomes a liability, spoken only in hushed, cautionary tones at cocktail parties. I knew Chloe wouldn't go down quietly. She was a creature of optics. She had spent 10 years curating a digital persona as the brilliant, empathetic female founder, the operational genius, holding up the reclusive, eccentric engineer. She believed her own press. 3 days after the Zenith merger hit the wire with my name listed as sole CEO, and no mention of her or Derek, she struck back. An exclusive article dropped on Silicon Valley Insider. The headline was clickbait garbage. Aura Tech exclusive. The dark side of the Zenith merger. Did paranoia force out the co-founders? I sat in my new, expansive office at Zenith, reading the piece on my tablet. Chloe had played the victim flawlessly. She was quoted as an anonymous source close to the ousted executives, but I could hear her voice in every carefully crafted sentence. She claimed the pressure of the buyout had triggered a massive mental health crisis in me. She painted a picture of a paranoid, erratic founder who illegally locked them out of the building to steal their share of the glory. She's threatening a wrongful termination suit in the press because she knows she can't win one in court. Arthur said through the speakerphone on my desk, "We can file a defamation claim by noon. Send a cease and desist to the publication." "No," I said, tracing the edge of my tablet screen. "If we sue, we legitimize the argument. We turn it into a he said, she said dispute. It makes me look exactly as defensive and erratic as she claims I am." "So we do nothing?" Arthur asked, sounding skeptical. "I didn't say that," I murmured. "Show don't tell, Arthur. We don't need a public screaming match. We just need to cut off her oxygen." I spent the next 2 hours compiling an email. I didn't send it to the press. I didn't tweet it. I sent it to exactly 24 people. They were the managing partners of the top venture capital firms in the city, the senior recruiters at the major tech conglomerates, and the board members of the industry associations, Chloe loved to schmooze. The email had no subject line. The body contained a single sentence: for your internal risk assessment protocols regarding recent applicants. Attached was the unredacted forensic accounting report. It showed the wire transfers. It showed the Cayman Island Shell Company. Most damning of all, it included screenshots of Chloe's private messages coordinating the forgery. It was irrefutable, undeniable proof of felony-level corporate theft. I hit send. Then, I closed my laptop and went to get lunch. The results were not immediate, but they were absolute. That evening, there was a high-profile networking mixer hosted by a prominent angel investor. It was the kind of event Chloe lived for. Open-bar ambient house music, a room full of soft lighting, and deep pockets. I didn't attend, but I didn't need to. I had eyes in the room. A junior developer I had mentored texted me live updates. 8:15 p.m. Chloe just walked in, wearing the red dress, looking around for the host. 8:32 p.m. She approached the table with the Sequoia guys. They literally turned their backs. One of them checked his phone and walked away. 9:05 p.m. It's getting brutal. People are physically stepping out of her way when she walks toward the bar. She cornered a recruiter from Apex. He talked to her for 10 seconds, looked panicked, and said he had to use the restroom. He left the building. I sat on my sofa in the dark watching the messages roll in. There was no triumph in it, no joy, just a cold, heavy satisfaction. It was like watching a surgical amputation. Necessary. Bloody. Final. Chloe had built her entire existence on the perception of her value. I didn't have to ruin her reputation publicly. I just had to show the people with the money that she was a liability. In our world, being a thief wasn't necessarily a deal breaker, but being a careless, caught thief who left a paper trail that was unforgivable. The final text came at 9:45 p.m. She's crying, standing by the coat check. Derek just showed up. They are fighting in the lobby, loudly. I locked my phone and set it face down on the coffee table. The alliance was breaking. They had only been united by greed and the promise of a massive payout. Without the money, they were just two terrible people trapped in the wreckage of their own consequences. The oxygen was gone. Now they were just suffocating each other. The hardest part of burning your life to the ground is the smell of the smoke afterward. It was Friday night. The Zenith deal was officially closed. The money had cleared into my accounts, more money than I could spend in 100 lifetimes. The lawsuits against Derek and Chloe were slowly grinding them into dust. By all metrics, I had won. I had survived. But as I unlocked the door to my apartment, the silence hit me like a physical blow. This place used to be loud. Derek singing off-key in the shower. The smell of his awful, expensive cologne lingering in the hallway. The sound of his keys dropping into the ceramic bowl by the door. I walked into the living room and turned on a single lamp. The apartment was a disaster. Earlier that day, while I was at the office, I had hired a moving company to pack up everything that belonged to him. His clothes, his golf clubs, his ridiculous espresso machine. They had boxed it all up and shipped it to a cheap motel by the airport, where I knew his credit card would barely cover a week. Now, there were empty spaces everywhere. A rectangular dust mark on the console table where his record player used to sit. Bare hangers rattling softly in the closet. Half-empty bathroom shelves. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, letting my head drop into my hands. The grief finally caught up to me. Not grief for losing them, I didn't miss the monster who held the gun, and I didn't miss the coward who helped her load it. I grieved for the girl I was a month ago. I grieved for the naive, trusting version of Harper who thought she was loved. I mourned the 3 years I had spent planning a future with a phantom. A sharp knock at the door broke the silence. I stiffened. I didn't move. The knock came again, louder, more frantic. "Harper, please. I know you're in there. The doorman said you came up." "Derek." I took a slow, deep breath, forcing the tremor out of my hands. I stood up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. He looked ruined. The perfectly styled hair was a rat's nest. He was wearing a wrinkled hoodie and jeans, his face pale and shadowed, with a 3-day beard. He looked like a man who had finally woken up to the reality of his own destruction. I unbolted the door and opened it just a few inches, leaving the security chain attached. "You have 30 seconds before I call the police," I said. My voice was a dead calm. "Harper, please just look at me," he begged, pressing his hands flat against the doorframe, as if he could push his way back into my life. I didn't want this. None of this was my idea. 30 seconds. "It was Chloe," he blurted out, tears welling in his eyes. He looked pathetic, a cornered animal willing to chew its own leg off. "She got in my head, Harper. You were always working. You were always so distant. She was there, and she kept whispering these things, telling me you were going to cut me out, that you didn't respect me. She manipulated me. She used my insecurities against me." I stared at him through the narrow gap. He was crying, now actual tears tracking down his face. "Are you done?" I asked. "I love you," he choked out. "I swear to God I still love you. We can fix this. I'll testify against her. I'll tell the lawyers everything. Just let me come inside. Let me come home." The anger that had fueled me for the past week suddenly vanished. It wasn't replaced by pity or even disgust. It was replaced by an overwhelming, profound apathy. He wasn't a mastermind. He wasn't some tragic villain. He was just a weak, greedy little man who took the easiest path available to him every single time. "Derek," I said softly. He stopped crying, looking at me with a spark of desperate hope. Yes, Harper. In another life, you succeeded," I told him. My voice was quiet, meant only for him. "In another life, you took the company, you took the money, and you let me die." He blinked confusion, washing over his tear-stained face. What are you talking about, Harper? You're not making sense." "I know," I said. "You wouldn't understand. But you need to hear this, Derek. You didn't do this because Chloe manipulated you. You did this because you are fundamentally empty. There is nothing inside you but a mirror that reflects whoever is standing in front of it. Chloe just happened to be the one holding the mirror. Harper, I don't hate you anymore," I said. And as I spoke the words, I realized they were true. "I just don't care that you exist. Do not come here again. Do not call. If you contact me, I will have you arrested for trespassing. And Derek," he swallowed hard, his hands slipping off the doorframe. "Have a nice life at the motel," I said. I shut the door in his face. I slid the deadbolt home with a heavy metallic click. I stood in the entryway for a long time, listening to the muffled sound of his footsteps retreating down the hall. The apartment was completely silent again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. It felt like a blank page. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water, and drank it down. The water tasted sharp and clear. I looked out the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering skyline of the city. The past was finally dead. The future was mine to build. And tomorrow, I had a company to run. Justice in the real world doesn't look like a movie climax. There are no dramatic courtroom speeches, no sudden gasps from a crowded gallery. Justice is a slow, grinding bureaucracy of paperwork, fluorescent lights, and billable hours. It's an Excel spreadsheet where your life is reduced to columns of debit and credit. 2 months into the Zenith acquisition, I sat in a windowless conference room at Arthur's firm. The air conditioning was set to a sterile 65 degrees. Across the heavy oak table sat a mediator, 2 pale associate lawyers, and a video monitor displaying a live feed from a deposition room 3 floors down. On the screen, Derek was sweating. He wore a suit that had clearly been bought off the rack at a discount department store. The tailored navy wool of his Aura Tech days was gone sold or pawned, replaced by cheap polyester that bunched at the shoulders. His boyish charm had curdled into the twitchy paranoia of a man facing 20 years in federal prison. "Mr. Hayes," the mediator sighed, tapping a thick stack of printed emails. "Your client is seeking full restitution plus punitive damages that frankly exceed the combined net worth of the defendants. The defendants attempted to execute a fraudulent transfer of intellectual property valued at $80 million. Arthur replied. He didn't even look up from his notepad. "We are entirely comfortable bankrupting them to the 5th generation." I watched the monitor. Arthur's junior partner was grilling Derek about a specific string of text messages. Video feed audio. "On September 12th, you messaged Chloe regarding the proxy document. Quote, did you get the notary stamp? End quote. Who obtained the fraudulent notary seal, Derek?" Derek flinched. He looked at his lawyer, a public defender, who looked like he hadn't slept since 2019. The lawyer gave a microscopic nod. "Chloe did," Derek stammered. He swallowed his Adam's apple bobbing sharply. "She knew a guy, some bartender who used to be a paralegal. She paid him $2,000 cash to backdate the stamp. I didn't even go with her." "Objection!" A voice crackled through the speaker. Chloe's lawyer sitting out of frame. "Hearsay. It's on the record." The junior partner continued relentlessly. "Derek, are you stating under oath that Chloe orchestrated the physical forgery of the proxy addendum?" "Yes," Derek said. His voice broke. "She said Harper was going to cut us out. She said it was the only way to protect what we built." I reached over and muted the audio feed. The silence in my conference room was thick and heavy. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the muted screen. Derek was weeping now, burying his face in his hands. It was pathetic. They had turned on each other the second the asset freeze hit. There is no honor among thieves, especially when the thieves are a narcissist and a coward. The moment the DA offered a plea deal for the first one to cooperate, it became a foot race to see who could wear the wire faster. Derek won. He flipped on Chloe, handing over a secondary hard drive he had hidden in his golf bag, detailing every single one of her offshore contacts. "He's giving us everything," Arthur noted finally, looking up. "The DA is going to recommend 5 years for him. Chloe is looking at a minimum of 12 for masterminding the wire fraud and the forgery." "Good," I said. The word tasted like ash. Arthur looked at me, his gray eyes perceptive. "You don't look happy, Harper. We won. The civil suit is practically a formality now. We seize whatever assets they have left, garnish any future wages they might ever earn, and they go to prison." I looked away from the monitor. I looked at my hands. They were steady. No phantom steering wheel. No blood. just clean, manicured fingers resting on a polished wood table. "I'm not unhappy, Arthur," I said quietly. "I'm just tired of looking at them. I want it over. The final deposition is tomorrow. Chloe. After that, we file the summary judgment. You never have to see them again." I nodded. But I knew it wasn't that simple. You can lock the monsters in a cage. You can take their money. But you can't erase the fact that they lived in your house. I left the law firm at noon. The city was sharp and bright, a cold December wind whipping down the avenues. I walked for miles, letting the physical exertion burn off the residual adrenaline. My life now was unrecognizable from the one I had left behind. At Zenith, I had a corner office, a dedicated engineering team of 50 people, and complete creative control over the next generation of logistics algorithms. Richard Cole, for all his ruthless corporate sociopathy, respected me. We spoke the same language, efficiency scale, and absolute lack of sentimentality. I was wealthy beyond comprehension. I lived in a penthouse with biometric security. I had a driver, and I was completely, utterly alone. I hadn't been on a date. I hadn't made a new friend. Every time someone smiled at me in the Zenith break room, every time an executive offered to buy me a coffee, my brain instantly ran a threat assessment. What do they want? How can they leverage this? Are they building a paper trail? The trauma of the first life wasn't a ghost. It was a firewall. It kept everyone out. It kept me safe. But safety is just another word for isolation if you don't know how to turn the system off. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was an unrecognized number. I almost ignored it, but the prefix was local. "Harper Quinn," I answered. "Harper, don't hang up." The voice was thin, raspy, and stripped of all its former velvet. But I knew it immediately. I stopped walking. The wind howled through the concrete canyon of the financial district. "How did you get this number, Chloe?" I asked. My voice was a dead calm. "I paid a private investigator my last $500, she said. She let out a dry, broken laugh. "They shut off my phone yesterday. I'm calling from a burner. Harper, I need to see you. We have nothing to say to each other. Your deposition is tomorrow. Speak to Arthur." "Derek is lying," she blurted out, her voice rising in panic. "He's putting it all on me. The notary, the offshore accounts, he was the one who pushed for it. He said you didn't respect him as a man. He said you emasculated him. Harper, he's going to let me take the fall for everything." "You did take the fall, Chloe. You set up the accounts. You drafted the addendum. You just didn't realize Derek was cowardly enough to keep the receipts. Please," she begged. The sound of it made my skin crawl. It was the exact tone she used to use when asking to borrow my clothes or asking me to cover her mistakes with investors. Just 10 minutes, face to face, after everything we meant to each other. 10 years, Harper. You owe me 10 minutes. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the traffic blur past. I didn't owe her anything. I owed her a bullet, honestly. But a cold, hard curiosity bloomed in my chest. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the architect of my murder, stripped of her weapons, standing in the ruins of her own hubris. "St. John's Park," I said, checking my watch. "Corner of Hudson and Late. 10 minutes. If you bring a lawyer, or if you raise your voice, I walk away, and I instruct Arthur to petition for the maximum sentencing guidelines." I hung up before she could answer. St. John's Park was mostly empty, the winter chill keeping the usual crowds of nannies and dog walkers indoors. I stood by the iron fountain in the center, wrapped in a heavy wool coat, my hands buried deep in my pockets. I saw her, walking up the path before she saw me. If I hadn't known what I was looking for, I might not have recognized her. The Chloe I knew was a creature of immaculate polish. Silk blouses, blown-out hair, a posture that demanded the room's attention. The woman walking toward me looked like a hollowed-out shell. She wore a cheap, oversized puffer jacket. Her blonde hair was tied back in a greasy knot. The dark circles under her eyes looked like bruises, and her cheekbones were sharp, jutting out from a face that had lost 10 pounds it couldn't afford to lose. She stopped 10 feet away. She looked at me, her eyes tracking over my tailored coat, the expensive leather boots, the calm, unbothered expression on my face. A flash of pure, venomous envy cut through her exhaustion, gone as quickly as it appeared. "You look good," she croaked. "You look exactly how you should," I replied. She flinched. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the cold wind. "They evicted me," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The asset freeze caught my checking account. I couldn't pay the rent on the loft. I'm sleeping on a friend's couch in Queens. And Derek won't even look at me in the hearings. Actions have consequences, Chloe. It's a foundational concept of physics and the law." "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, a sudden surge of angry energy animating her thin frame. She took a step forward. "I didn't move an inch. You stopped the merger theft. You fired us. You humiliated us in front of the entire industry. Why isn't that enough? Why do you have to put me in a cage? Because you tried to destroy me." I said, my voice steady, carrying over the ambient noise of the city traffic. "You didn't just want my money, Chloe. You wanted my life. You wanted my company, my fiancé, my success. You wanted to erase me and step into the empty space." Chloe stared at me. Her jaw tightened. The pathetic weeping victim routine vanished, replaced by something much darker, something honest. "Because you didn't deserve it," she spat out, her voice cracking. "You never appreciated any of it. You sat in your dark little office writing code, ignoring the world. I was the one who went out there. I was the one who charmed the investors. I was the one who held Derek's hand when you were too busy building servers to notice he was lonely. I did the work, Harper. You just got lucky with an algorithm." There it was, the ugly, rotting core of our decade-long friendship. "You think writing the architecture of a predictive logistics engine is luck?" I asked, a bitter smile touching the corner of my mouth. "You think building a company from the ground up is just a matter of smiling at the right people? You are a parasite, Chloe. You attached yourself to my talent because you possess none of your own. I was your best friend," she screamed, the sound echoing off the concrete. "A passing businessman gave us a wide berth, looking alarmed." "No," I said softly. "You were my shadow, and shadows disappear when the light changes." She stared at me, chest heaving. The rage burned out of her as quickly as it had ignited, leaving her sagging, exhausted. "I'm going to prison, Harper," she whispered, realization stark and terrifying, finally settling into her bones. "I'm 32 years old, and my life is over." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." I turned around and started walking away. "Harper, please," she cried out behind me. I'm so sorry, I'll do anything. Please just call off the lawyers. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just kept walking down the paved path, out of the park, and onto the crowded sidewalk. As I walked, I realized something strange. My chest didn't feel tight anymore. The heavy, suffocating block of grief and anger that I had been carrying since the moment I woke up in my own bed a month ago was gone. Chloe wasn't a monster. She wasn't a mastermind. She was just a sad, empty person who let envy poison her brain. She wasn't worth my fear. She wasn't worth my trauma. I hailed a cab. As I slid into the back seat and gave the driver the address for the Zenith building, I pulled out my phone. I deleted her burner number from my call log. It was over. The ghost in the machine was finally purged. Time is a straight line until it isn't. In my first life, I died on a Tuesday, January 18th. It was raining. The roads were slick. I had left the office early because the migraines were blinding. I was driving up the winding access road toward the Palisades, seeking the quiet of a rented cabin when the brakes simply snapped to the floorboards. In this life, January 18th fell on a Tuesday. It was raining. I woke up at 6 a.m. The penthouse was silent. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the city skyline into streaks of gray and bruised purple. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, the physiological memory of terror. My body knew what today was, even if my logic tried to dismiss it. I got out of bed. I didn't put on a suit. I put on jeans, a heavy sweater, and a pair of boots. I called my assistant at Zenith. Cancel all my meetings today. I'm taking a personal day. Of course, Ms. Quinn. Everything okay? Everything is fine, I said. I took the elevator down to the private garage. I didn't take my usual town car. I walked over to the heavy utilitarian SUV I had purchased a month ago. I ran a diagnostic check on the dashboard. Tire pressure normal. Brake fluid optimal. I drove out into the storm. I didn't know why I was doing this. It defied all logic. Arthur would have told me I was insane. Richard Cole would have demanded I see a psychiatrist. But I knew that if I stayed in my apartment today, hiding under the covers, waiting for the clock to strike midnight, the trauma would win. The first timeline would still own a piece of my mind. I drove north, out of the city, over the bridge, toward the Palisades. The rain was heavy, the wipers slashing violently across the windshield. The road grew narrower, winding up the steep inclines lined with dead winter trees. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel. My knuckles were white. With every mile, the memory of the first life bled into the present. I could smell the burning rubber. I could hear the sickening crunch of metal. I could feel the violent concussive force of the airbag deploying, breaking my nose, shattering my ribs. Breathe, I told myself. Show don't tell. I looked at the dashboard. 45 miles per hour. I approached the exact curve. I knew it intimately. The sharp hairpin bend with the sheer drop-off to the right. The rusted guardrail that hadn't held the weight of my car. My foot hovered over the brake pedal. In the old life, this was the moment I pressed down, feeling only the terrifying, empty slack of a severed brake line. I held my breath. I pressed the pedal. The SUV engaged immediately. The anti-lock brakes pulsed under my foot. The heavy vehicle slowed smoothly, gripping the wet asphalt, gliding perfectly around the sharp curve. I pulled over onto the shoulder, 50 yards past the bend. I put the car in park. I killed the engine. The only sound was the rain drumming against the roof. I sat there in the silence. I waited for the phantom pain. I waited for the smell of gasoline and blood. Nothing came. There was just the smell of leather and the cold dampness of the New York winter. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel and let out a long, shuddering breath. It wasn't a sob. It was an exhale. A real, deep, lung-clearing exhale. I was alive. Not just breathing. Not just surviving. I was actually alive. The timeline had shattered. The loop was broken. The people who had tried to kill me were rotting in holding cells, waiting for a judge to hand down decades of consecutive sentences. My company was a cornerstone of a massive tech empire. My bank accounts were untouchable, but more importantly, my mind was mine again. I sat in the car for an hour, watching the rain slowly taper off. The gray clouds broke, letting shafts of pale winter sunlight hit the wet asphalt. It wasn't a miracle. It was just weather. It was just reality. I started the engine. I put the car in drive. I didn't turn around and go back to the city. I kept driving north. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just wanted to drive. I wanted to listen to the radio. I wanted to pull into a diner and drink terrible coffee and watch people go about their normal, boring, beautiful lives. For the first time in my life, I wasn't building a company to prove my worth. I wasn't sustaining a relationship out of habit. I wasn't fighting a war for my own survival. The war was over. I was the only one left standing on the battlefield. It was time to figure out what came next. If Harper's journey of ruthless revenge and reclaiming her empire kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Surviving betrayal is one thing, but completely dismantling the people who tried to destroy you, that's an entirely different level of justice. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the strongest revenge is massive success. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive into the dark. Dramatic stories of betrayal and rebirth. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Harper's shoes?